The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant good evening to you wherever you may be. This is Comfortably Zoned Radio, and it's time for Dodgers baseball, a tale of two cities, from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. My name is Peter Trunk, and my co-hosts are Fred Walin and Ron Rabinovitz. Fred, how you doing out there in L.A.?
I have a question for you guys.
Go ahead.
Why is today different than most other days?
Why?
Wow. Why?
Well, because the Dodgers managed to beat the very, very tough Cincinnati Reds after dropping the first 6 times to them this season. They managed to get a victory. All right, folks, we're taping this on Wednesday, so if you're shocked as I was today, congratulations. Put some candle on.
I'm going to tell you what shocked me, Freddie, and that's a very good that's a great start to the show. Although we usually start in Brooklyn and work our way west, but I love it. What really killed me today was that the Dodgers actually got hits, real hits, legitimate base hits with men in scoring position today.
How do you like that?
And we talked.
How do you like that? And not only that, Fred, but a couple of them were with 2 men out. They haven't done that since 2017.
That's hard.
Perhaps even more remarkable is the fact that the hits did not come against Homer Bailey, who wasn't even pitching today.
Oh, he was.
Homer Bailey is the Cy Young Award winner in my eyes. We'll get to that later. That voice you heard, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to introduce you to in about 17 seconds. First, I want to say hello to Ronnie Rabinovitz in St. Paul, Minneapolis, Peter? Minnesota. How you doing, Ronnie?
Good. How are you?
A little wet. A little wet. It's been raining here. You know how Fred used to lament the fact that it was so damn hot and humid out in the valley in L.A.? Well, I'm about to tell you, I'm a dog lover, and I have dogs, and I walk my dogs, and I can tell you more about the weather here in New Jersey, central New Jersey, than any guy on the TV or the radio can tell you. When I had my first dog, I had him for 10 years, and I walked him, of course, 3 times a day, and I think I used my umbrella 3 times in 10 years. I walked him 3 times a day for 10 years. I think I used my umbrella. The other times when it was lightly raining, I would wear my baseball cap or whatever. I've got a brand new dog.
Right.
I got him in October of 2017. And, of course, I walk him 3 times a day now, from October to now. I have yet to put the umbrella back in the closet. It rains, it rains, it rains, and it rains.
Well,
I feel like I live in Seattle.
Well, wait a minute. So I guess you're saying that there is such a thing as climate change? We've screwed the atmosphere, the ionosphere.
Fred,
you wouldn't be saying that, would you?
If you know someone that doesn't believe in climate change, don't talk to them anymore. Okay.
I just throw up when I watch the Orange Idiot on TV, so don't worry about that.
Oh man, the flat earthers kill me. I swear they do. They're just incredible. Anyway, it's been raining. So to answer your question, Ronnie, how am I? I'm happy. I'm content, but I'm wet. And
You're wet.
Yeah, I'm wet.
Here is
too much rain.
Minneapolis, it's gorgeous.
Oh,
85 degrees today. Not a cloud in the sky. Beautiful
All right.
day.
All right, make me jealous. Go ahead. All right, let's change the subject for a second. We have a treat tonight. We have a special guest. I'm going to read it off the back flap of one of his books. You already know, since it's off of one of his books, he's an author. But here it is. I'm going to read it. Scott David Russell is renowned as an innovative baseball statistician and has written 2 statistical books on the Boston Red Sox. The first, Too Much Time on His Hands, was published by Dirty Water Publishing in 2008, and the second, Still Too Much Time on His Hands, was published in 2009. Scott was the personal statistician of controversial former Boston Red Sox and Montreal Expos pitcher Bill Spaceman Lee, who was literally blacklisted from baseball for his admitted marijuana usage. Scott says never. I shouldn't have read that because I'm reading it from. It's going to go into what the book is about, and that's Joey Giardello. We'll talk about that. I want to welcome Scott Russell to the show. Scott, welcome to the show.
My pleasure. And as an old Brooklyn Dodgers fan, I'm in good company here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Welcome.
So Freddie was born and raised in Los Angeles, but don't hold that against him. He's a great guy.
Nope. I do recall that Pete Hamill's father, the great Pete Hamill's father, his one goal in life was to find Walter O'Malley's grave so he could urinate on it. And that became, he said that with an Irish brogue, incidentally, which is very charming. And that became my goal in life also.
All right. Have you?
However, I have nothing against the Los Angeles Dodgers other than the fact that they should be in Brooklyn.
Oh, of course they should be in Brooklyn. We all know that. There's just, to me and to Ronnie, I don't mean to speak for you, Ronnie, and you can correct me immediately. To me and Ronnie, they're just on a long road trip.
Yeah, very long road trip.
Very, very long road trip.
Yeah. 60
anyway, listen, let's get down to brass tacks here. Scott Russell has written some books. He is our guest tonight. I want to talk about some of the books. There is one book that he wrote that's called Prophet's End. Prophet's End, okay? And I want him to talk a little bit about Prophet's End. And before you do that, Scott Russell, I want to tell you that many years ago, and I'm bad at dates, so don't try to corner me in here, but many years ago, I remember when I read in the newspaper that Jackie Onassis was dating Pete Hamill. And I had been a fan and had always been a fan of Pete Hamill and all of his books. My favorite is Snow in August. But I've read them all, every one of them. In fact, I've read 2 or 3 of them more than once. And Pete Hamill was a great columnist for the New York Post, among other publications. And when I read that you liked Pete Hamill, loved, I dare say, Pete Hamill, I said, I got to get in touch with this guy because anybody can be a Brooklyn Dodger fan, but not many people can love Pete Hamill. And that's how I got in touch with you.
Well, that's amazing. Pete Hamill, in fact, remains my idol. And I grew up reading Pete Hamill, and not only the New York Daily News, the New York Post, Long Island Newsday, as you alluded to, his incredible novels, which included the book you had mentioned, Snow in August. Snow in August was not heralded as one of his greatest books, and yet I agree with you entirely. I thought Snow in August was just a remarkable tale, and perhaps his best, and that's saying a lot. But this book you mentioned, Prophet's End, which is PROPHET', Prophet's End, is an apolitical tale. And it is not only dedicated to Pete Hamill, but it is also dedicated to first responders. And it is inspired by a otherworldly beautiful young lady named Jennifer Bricker. And if you're not familiar with Jennifer Bricker, Jen Bricker is the type of young lady, she will change your life. I actually envision Prophet's End is being transitioned into a motion picture, one in which only Jen Bricker could play the lead romantic role. She would stand Hollywood on its not-so-respective heads. Jen, if you're not familiar with her, was born without legs. She is incredibly beautiful, and when she inspired this work, I attempted to contact her, figuring that there was no way she'd get back to me. Not only did she get back to me, she got back to me within moments, and it's what she said in one sentence that brought me to tears. She said, "Dear Scott," she said, "it's really amazing how much of me you truly see." And then I realized that there are angels on this planet, and she is definitely one of them. But that's Prophet's End. And on the cover of Prophet's End, there's a artist rendition. The cover was drawn by a young lady named Marielle Hester, great artist. And it shows what Jen Bricker would look like, her visage at the age of perhaps 10. And spoiler alert, there's also a drawing of Sandy Amoros making a catch on the cover.
I'm looking at it right now. Go ahead.
That's Sandy Amoros, and spoiler alert, the Dodgers win the game 2-0, and Gil Hodges knocks in both runs.
Yep.
That's
amazing. And the young boy, of course, the protagonist in the book, is sleeping on a fluffy pillow in the middle of all of this, on top of where it says Prophet's End. I enjoyed the book. I gobbled it up, read it in, it took me 2 nights. I could have read it in 1 night, but if you even ask my wife, I hate when I'm enjoying a book and it's about to end, so I always put it down so I have something for the next day. And I really, really enjoyed it. I'm in the middle of another book that you wrote about Joey Giardello, a middleweight boxer, and the reason I asked you for that book, and you were so nice to sign both of these books and send me a copy. When I was a young lad, I laughed out loud when I read that you would ask your dad to stay up and watch the fights on Friday night on Channel 9, and sometimes he would let you and sometimes he wouldn't, and you would listen to Don Dunphy, the great Hall of Fame boxing announcer Don Dunphy, and from all different venues, mostly Madison Square Garden, the old Madison Square Garden, before the one where they ripped down Pennsylvania Station in 1968. But Don Dunphy was another hero of mine. I loved the way his staccato nasal inflections, and I used to watch the fights, and many times I remember seeing Joey Giardello. His name, even though, as Scott and I both know, that wasn't his real name, but the name that he used, and it's quite an intricate story. But you know, his name, when the announcer would say Giardello, it was just like a G and an R and then Dello, and it was almost mesmerizing for a young guy like myself to listen to it on the TV. I didn't listen on the radio like you did, Scott. I know that you said you listened to some of the fights on the radio, but they were brought to you by Gillette Razor, and we all know that famous Gillette music. Even if you weren't a boxing fan, it came on during the World Series, and it was like brought to you by Gillette, the makers of, blah blah blah. And then Don Dunphy would come on, and Joey Giardello had it. Joey Giardello's name, you could almost sing it when you were a kid. I could anyway. You could almost sing. It was almost like a song. Giardello. Sounded like a food, sounded like a song. But I used to watch him and Gene Fulmer and all those guys. The middleweights were my favorite. But I digress. We'll get back to Scott Russell. Scott, tell us about whatever you want to tell us. You finish up Prophet's End and then go wherever you want.
Well, of course, I certainly don't want to drown out Fred and Ron, that's for sure. But I can tell you that Prophet's End, one of the chief characters in Prophet's End is Pete Hamill. Pete's actually a character in the book, as you're aware, and it's my dream of meeting Mr. Hamill, and apparently that will happen in December of this year, but that's another story. And I only hope when I meet him that he doesn't go Bob Dylan on me. There's a story behind that too, but that's another complete. You may not be aware of this, but Pete Hamill actually wrote the liner notes in one of Bob Dylan's album covers.
Okay.
And yeah, he was contracted, I guess, by, I'm not sure if it was Columbia Records back then, to write the liner notes. And the liner notes were magnificent, as anything is it, written by Pete Hamill. But apparently, Dylan, who is, for lack of a better term, a complete asshole. Am I allowed to say that in the air? I already did.
Sure. You can say that, but you can say asshole, but you can't say fuck.
I love it. I love it. Well, I never fucking curse, so you don't have to worry about that. But at any rate, Dylan had written Hamill had written the liner notes in one of Hamill's albums, and Dylan was asked, "What did you think of the liner notes?" And Dylan responded, "I don't know who this Hamill guy is, but he knows nothing about me." Now, if you know anything about Bob Dylan, that type of response is not particularly too surprising. It was Bob Dylan who once was sitting in, I believe it was Austin, Texas, seated at a table with Kinky Friedman and his group, the Kinky Friedman and the Texas Jew Boys. Yep. Honestly, that's their name. Right. And the road manager for Led Zeppelin.
They don't make Jews like Jesus anymore.
Oh, I love him. He's fantastic. So, so here comes the road manager of Led Zeppelin walking over to introduce himself to Bob Dylan. He extends his hand to Dylan and says, "Hi, I'm such and such. I'm the road manager for Led Zeppelin." Now, in those days, Led Zeppelin were the hottest band on the planet.
Sure. Yeah.
So Dylan doesn't accept his hand. He stands up, looks the guy in the face, and says, "I don't bother you with my problems," and walked away.
Oh.
So that's Bob Dylan for you. That's the way he always was, and I loved his music. In fact, truthfully, I followed Dylan and the band up and down the East Coast from as far south as Aberdeen, Maryland, and as far north as Burlington, Vermont, back in the 60s. But it took me several years to realize that I was actually there for the band. I was there for Rick Danko and Rick Manuel and Garth Hudson and Levon Helm and Robbie Robertson, and not necessarily
music from Big Pink.
Oh my God, they were incredible. And incidentally, there's a band today that's been blessed by the late Levon Helm and Garth Hudson and Rick Danko before he passed on. They're called the Weight Band, W-E-I-G-H-T. And my wife Peg and I saw them up in Ogunquit, Maine about 2 or 3 years ago, and they are not a tribute band, and they are not a cover band. They are the band. If you close your eyes, you'll swear that you're in the room with the original band. But we're getting off track here. And
can I just say one thing?
We always do.
Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, go ahead, Fred.
About Bob Dylan?
Sure.
He was no Phil Ochs.
Thank you so much. Oh, my God. Fred, I love you. Phil Ochs,
I ain't marching anymore,
was the voice of our generation in those days. Phil Ochs was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And incidentally, Phil was a good friend of Bob Dylan's, but Phil was never recognized for his genius. He really wasn't. And Phil wrote the most remarkable, meaningful, topical songs of the time, and just remarkable. I think Tape from California, that album was just remarkable. His live concert from Carnegie Hall, Ochs was incredible. And yes, definitely, no question. Phil Ochs was the voice of that.
Phil Ochs was a giant in his field, and very sadly committed suicide. He wanted to be a big star. He wanted to be Elvis Presley. He wanted to be a gigantic star, and it always eluded him. and a very, very sad ending.
You know what the story
It's a sad ending.
Go ahead, Fred.
You know what the story was, and I've got every album he ever wrote. When I was at Cal State University Northridge, I was the head of the Young Democrats. We brought him on campus. But anyways, the story about Phil Ochs was that his dad was like a colonel in the Army, and he went crazy. And Phil, of course, was on the other side politically from his dad, so that's on one side. And then he was in Europe, like right after the Vietnam War ended, and somebody hit him, and he lost his voice. He could not sing at the same level. His voice was not the same. And as you indicated correctly, he went to his sister's house, I think in '76, and hung himself. And
my God.
When I heard that, I mean, because I didn't travel distances like you did, but I saw him here at the Troubadour in L.A. 5 or 6 times, and he was just unbelievable in person. And as you guys said, every album was just, I mean, they meant something. Every word he said meant something. And again,
Phil actually wrote, in my opinion, literally the history of the world, and I'm not speaking of the history of the world, part 1 by Mel Brooks, incidentally. He wrote the history of the world in a song called When in Rome. When in Rome, which to me was probably the most brilliant song ever written. It's topical, it's beautiful, and it touches on practically every incident in the history of the world. You just have to listen to it closely. When in Rome.
Yeah,
amazing song. Amazing song. Phil Ochs.
Oh. Yeah. Okay, so we're still talking about Prophet's End, or are we going to jump to Joey? What are we going to do here?
Well,
we'll jump to Ebbets Field. What do you want to do?
I'll speak about Prophet's End very, very briefly, and that's that. As I said, Pete Hamill's a character in the book. It's my homage to first responders in the aftermath of 9/11. It's intentionally a brief novel, Pete Hamill style, and that's the last time I'll ever mention my name in the same breath as Pete Hamill, because I couldn't shine the man's shoes, truthfully. But the story is one of faith and hope, and even amid the rubble of despair, there's hope and faith and hope for the future. And I still believe that there is hope for mankind. But it's difficult to believe it. Some mornings I realize that. But I think
you're right.
You'd all enjoy. And incidentally, my intention here is literally, as I said, to have this transitioned into a motion picture. I am not a mercenary. My wish is for Jen Bricker to play the lead romantic role, because, as I said, she'd alter Hollywood and the perceptions of people with alleged disabilities forever. To actually have a leading lady on the stage with Born Without Legs as a lead romantic role, she'd be incredible. And she shares that dream also, whatever it's worth. But so much for Prophet's End. And
right.
We'll get into the Brooklyn Dodgers. Well, by the way, the story of the Brooklyn Dodgers in the 1955 World Series is part of the book. As I said, Sandy Amoros is on the cover making that remarkable catch. And the story of Prophet's End definitely revolves around the Brooklyn Dodgers to a great extent. Yeah.
It does, and then I was surprised when I picked up and opened up Joey, your book about the extraordinary life and dream fulfilled of Joey Giardello, the middleweight boxer. I saw a picture of Joey Giardello with all the Brooklyn Dodgers in uniform and everything, Hodges, Erskine, all the guys. He was a Brooklyn Dodger fan.
Including Ron's old buddy, Jackie Robinson.
Yes,
and Jackie.
Robbie was in the picture, yeah.
Jackie inscribed the photograph.
Yes, he did.
Jackie actually inscribed the photograph.
Wow.
Because the photograph still hangs on Rosalie Tellelli's wall in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Rosalie, God bless her, is now 87 or 88 years old.
Explain to the people who that is. No one knows who Rosalie is except for me.
No.
Mrs. Joey Giardello.
Right.
Because Joey's actual name was Carmine Tellelli. So Rosalie Tellelli still has that picture on the wall. Jackie Robinson inscribed it to Joey.
Wow.
And it reads, to a real sincere guy. Sincere best wishes to a real sincere guy.
Right.
So quite a tribute from Jackie Robinson to Joey Giardello.
Yeah.
That's it. If I may jump in real fast, just as the so-called host of the show here, Joey Giardello was not his real name. What he did, this guy Carmine wanted to join the Army, and he was only 16. He couldn't join the Army, and what he did was he bought someone's birth certificate for $3, by the way, $3. He bought a guy named Joey Giardello's birth certificate, went down, joined the Army, got in the Army, and the rest, I don't want to spoil anything. But anyway, his name was not, in fact, Joey Giardello. So that's why his wife's name is not Giardello officially.
Well, just briefly, I can tell you that he joined the 82nd Airborne Division, which General Patton called the most elite division in the Army. And Joey was a paratrooper, in which case he made several successful jumps.
29.
A year later, his commanding officer, Joey was about 17 at this point, a year after his commanding officer demanded that he mow his lawn on a Sunday, and Joey, being a hot-headed Italian kid from Brooklyn, New York, said that we don't have to work on Sundays. And the guy said, mow my lawn. This is an order. And Joey said, no. He says, I refuse. I don't have to. So his commanding officer assailed him with an ethnic slur, calling him a dumb dago. And Joey did not act too intelligently. Wasn't a good career move. He punched out his commanding officer. So he winds up, he figures he's going to be court-martialed or God knows what. And he goes AWOL. Then he travels to Philadelphia. And the rest is history. And he tries to obtain a boxing license under the name Carmine Tellelli, but he's too young to get a boxing license also. So quite ignorantly, he becomes a boxer using the name he was AWOL from the Army from, Joey Giardello. And eventually the Army comes calling, and it's fascinating. And not to give you a spoiler alert or anything, but Joey winds up, of course, being a great fighter, goes back, and he gets his honorable discharge. And he and Rosalie's second son is born with Down syndrome. And in the 1950s, you were automatically almost forced to institutionalize any child who was born with Down syndrome. They refused. They insisted on raising Carmen at home, which they did. And the community center in Cherry Hill, New Jersey is named after the boy with Down syndrome, who just passed away about 2 or 3 years ago, a couple of days before his 60th birthday. And Joey was on the ground floor with Eunice Kennedy Shriver informing the Special Olympics.
Wow.
Yeah. He also danced, Joey and his wife also danced at JFK's inaugural ball in 1961. I would be remiss if I didn't say this because it ties in with the Brooklyn Dodgers. You told a fact that back in those days when a kid was born with Down syndrome, he was normally institutionalized, but the Giardello family said, no, we'll raise him at home. That also happened to Carl Erskine. You might recognize that name.
Yeah.
Carl Erskine had a son named Jimmy with Down syndrome.
Yeah.
And instead of institutionalizing him, they raised him at home. Jimmy is happily still alive, and active in the Special Olympics.
Yeah, except
But,
let me just say this one thing.
Yep.
Being a Shriver and getting involved with the Special Olympics, John F. Kennedy's sister, one of them, was institutionalized by good old Joe. And he was
in Kathleen. Yeah, in
Kathleen.
Wisconsin.
And he was embarrassed.
She was in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
That
was an awful thing.
Terrible.
Joe was not.
He was a son of a bitch.
Yeah, you said it. You said it. Thank you.
Really
a friend of Hitler's too, incidentally.
Yeah, he sure was.
Yeah.
Hitler, German sympathizer. Yeah, he sure was.
Yeah, Joe Kennedy was not a nice person, but
not a nice person. No, his boys were great.
Yeah.
I knew
Okay,
them all.
so now we talked a bit. We talked a bit about Prophet's End. We talked a bit about Joey. Let's talk about Ebbets Field. Scott, give us some memories. Talk to us. Tell us about your transistor radio and Vin Scully and Connie Desmond and what have you. Go ahead.
Well, before we head into that, just very briefly, I should tell you a pretty funny story as we bid adieu to Joey. A few years ago, I got a call from Joey Giardello's two sons who were on the New Jersey Turnpike, sitting in a car with a gentleman named Leo Rossi, who was in a lot of kind of like a secondary actor who's been in movies with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. And so Steve Tellelli and Joe Tellelli called me up and said, "You'll never guess who we have in the car with us." I said, "Okay, it's Leo Rossi." I said, "Oh, fantastic." Well, Leo just received a phone call from a gentleman named Joe Pistone. And Joe Pistone wanted you to know that he read Joey and enjoyed it. And I said, the name sounds familiar, Joe Pistone. And he says, well, you may know him by the name he was referred to in a movie he was in. And that, of course, was Donnie Brasco. Joe Pistone, the real Donnie Brasco, read Joey and enjoyed it. At that point, my response was, I'm not sure if I should be happy about this or should I relocate at this point. and that's a true story. I wanted to leave you with that.
That's funny.
But that was amazing. And I also got a call from a wonderful gentleman named Chaz Palminteri. Chaz Palminteri enjoyed Joey to the extent that he called me up and was actually interested in perhaps adapting Joey to a motion picture.
Right.
And, of course, I was blown away by this. I said, my God, yeah. He says, and, of course, Mr. Palminteri, I tried to call him that. He says, no, it's Chaz, he says. I said, okay, Chaz. That doesn't seem respectful enough, but he said, we'll have to raise funds for it, obviously. But my father idolized Joey Giardello. Huh. In fact, he said his father trained under a trainer called Charlie Caserta in the Bronx. And I told Chaz, I said, Charlie Caserta at the Mount Carmel CYO? And he says, exactly. I said, well, to be honest with you, Chaz, I was thrown out of the Mount Carmel CYO on occasion because I was just a young punk. He says, you're in good company, he says to me. And then he told me something remarkable. We would hang out at the Mount Carmel CYO to watch a young boxer named Billy Bello. And the name probably doesn't mean anything to you. But Billy Bello was a 19-year-old Golden Gloves champion who then turned professional at Madison Square Garden and had his first main event against Gaspar India Ortega. 2 nights later, Billy Bello was found dead on a roof near Fordham Road in the Bronx of a heroin overdose.
Oh, my God.
Now, that's when Chaz Palminteri dropped the bombshell on me. Do you know, he said in the movie, where his character, who was called Calagero, C, as he was referred to, that was really Chaz Palminteri, incidentally. And Chaz Palminteri told me that when the Robert De Niro character who played C's father in the movie told him there's nothing worse than wasted talent, he was referring to Billy Bello.
Wow.
And at that point I said, Chaz, my God, that's amazing. I didn't know that. I said, we used to go to the preliminaries. Every Friday night, my friends and I would go to Madison Square Garden to watch the boxing matches. And we would see Tony Tazzo, I told Chaz. Tony Tazzo was a former Golden Gloves champion, too, and he was part of a gang called the Fordham Baldies, the toughest gang in the Bronx, whose members included Dion DiMucci of Dion and the Belmonts.
Yeah.
And Dion wound up being a wonderful guy, incidentally. But at that point, Chaz Palminteri gave me perhaps the greatest compliment I've ever received in my life. He said to me over the phone, Scott, I know you're for real. We know a lot of the same people. But foolishly, Steve Tellelli, Joey Giardello's youngest son, and Joseph, his oldest son, said, Chaz Palminteri, who cares? We can get somebody better than him. Well, that was several years ago, and they're still waiting to get somebody better than Chaz Palminteri. Chaz was interested in doing Joey as a movie. I think it would have made a great movie. But on to the Brooklyn Dodgers. That's enough of...
Hey!
So, the question was, Ebbets Field. Here I am, an ardent Dodger fan, Brooklyn Dodgers fan, all throughout my entire childhood, and I never went to a game at Ebbets Field. Reason, I grew up in a New York Giants household in the South Bronx. Our apartment was on Crotona Park East in the South Bronx, overlooking Crotona Park. And my parents were Giants fans. So when I attended my first game at the Polo Grounds, which was a doubleheader against the Chicago Cubs, we would go to Sunday doubleheaders, show up there at 10 a.m., yeah, you could get into the ballpark in those days, those hours. Stopping at the delicatessen, picking up pastrami sandwiches or tongue sandwiches or God knows what, and thermoses and making a day of it, and then sitting there and watching a doubleheader. So I would have to watch my Brooklyn Dodgers at the Polo Grounds on the occasions where they came to town. I never went to Ebbets Field, not even once, but I grew up in the Polo Grounds, and I loved that misshapen jewel of a ballpark.
So did I.
It was horrendously, I mean, it cost Monty Irvin perhaps 60 or 80 home runs throughout his career, because he would drive the ball to left center field, and of course the fence out there was probably in Staten Island or something.
It was a huge ballpark. Oh, my God.
Yeah. And yet you could hit a pop-up, as Dusty Rhodes did, down the right field line and hit these very cheap home runs. My first games in the Polo Grounds were in 1953. Therefore, Willie Mays was in the Army.
Right.
So the Giants had a lineup of Whitey Lockman at first, Davey Williams at second, Alvin Dark at short, Hank Thompson at third, Monty Irvin in left, Bobby Thompson, the villain, in center, Don Mueller in right, and Wes Westrom behind the plate. Sure. And, of course, they had pitchers such as Jim Hearn, Sal Magley, Dave Kozlow, Larry Jansen, and
Sal the Barber.
Sal the Barber, who incredibly became a Brooklyn Dodger later on.
Which was great. Great.
I thought it was. And so that was my indoctrination to baseball, watching baseball at the Polo Grounds. Now, I'd like to tell you that I became a Brooklyn Dodgers fan because it was a politically correct thing to do. No, I was just a rotten kid who was contrary, and since everyone else in the household were Giant fans, I became a Dodgers fan. It wasn't because, and get this, I had no idea at the age of 8 that Jackie Robinson had been the first black player in the major leagues.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have a clue. It wasn't as if Vin Scully, Connie Desmond, or any of those broadcasters would tell you that. It's not like, here's Jackie Robinson, the first African American. Of course, in those days it was Negro, of course, but player in the major leagues. And I did not know. One day I'm sitting at a Brooklyn Dodgers game. It was a doubleheader on July 4th against the Giants in the Polo Grounds. In fact, I was very disappointed because my father was so distraught at seeing the Dodgers knock the crap out of the Giants in both ends that we left early that day.
Oh, no.
But my father leaned over and said to me, "You see that guy up at the plate, Jackie Robinson?" I said, "Yeah." "Don't let anybody ever tell you that there's a greater player or a greater clutch hitter than that man on the Dodgers." And I'm looking at my dad and I'm saying, really? I mean, Roy Campanella is an MVP, and Duke Snider is hitting 40 homers, and Carl Furillo is knocking the crap out of the ball, and Pee Wee Reese is the captain, and Robinson had slowed down. I think the year was probably 55 when this happened.
Yeah,
and
he slowed down then.
Yeah, he slowed down tremendously. I'm wondering, how the heck could Jackie Robinson be the best player and the best clutch hitter in the Dodgers? Well, at that moment, that precise moment, Jackie hit a line shot to left center field for a clean single, and I was even more impressed. But so that I never went to Ebbets Field. I had to watch my Dodgers.
Did he steal a base?
Oh my God, he was the only man I've ever seen in baseball history who could actually, he was 50-50 to get out of a rundown.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. That's
Couldn't
right.
see it. He's just an amazing baseball player.
Drove those pitchers crazy. He
He's
just jump up and down.
Just amazing. So,
Fabulous man.
I love that team, and of course, in those days, incidentally, my hero on the team. I have two great heroes on the team. One was Gil Hodges, and one was Roy Campanella. Campy was my favorite player, and reading the New York reading the New York Post in those days, truthfully, Roy Campanella and Jackie didn't necessarily see eye to eye on a lot of things.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't.
Yeah, and later on in their career, their friendship really improved.
Got closer. Yeah, right.
I think Jackie thought that Campy's ebullient personality and was more accepting of, he just wasn't militant at all.
Right,
Campy.
right.
And I think Jackie looked askance at that.
Right,
yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So are you a LA Dodger fan too?
No, I never could bring myself to root for the Los Angeles Dodgers. I just never could do that. Huh. Yeah, I never could. I'm not saying I dislike them. In fact, during the years, I almost became a Brooklyn Dodgers fan during the time that Sean Green was having a great season or two. I am Jewish. And of course, I can't say I identified with Sean Green, but he comported himself with such class, Sean Green, that I really became a huge fan of his. And I'll be honest with you, I was rooting for him every time he came to the plate.
I have Sean Green's jersey.
Wonderful. What a smooth swing.
Scott?
Yeah.
The best way not to see the LA Dodgers would be to move to Los Angeles or Las Vegas.
Yeah, you can't.
Very good, Fred.
So you get the best
Very good.
You get the best.
Blackout.
That's fantastic. That's
blackout.
Fantastic.
Well, to me, I've always said the scripture on the chest says Dodgers in Brooklyn and in LA.
Yeah, well, I tried to explain this to a lot of people in my lifetime, but evidently a lot of people don't agree with me, and that's okay. But you root for the laundry. You root for the laundry. Remember when you hated Sal Maglie, and then you became a Dodger and you loved him?
Yes.
The only reason you hated him and then you loved him was because he put your laundry on.
Right. Exactly.
His blouse no longer said Giants; it said Dodgers.
Right. It said Dodgers. Right. Exactly.
That's how it goes. That's the way it is. But I tell you what, I turn on the television set and I see, the camera close up of a Dodger pitcher. Let's say it's Kershaw or whatever. It doesn't have to be anybody in particular. But when the camera just lingers there and you see the snow white jersey with the blue script Dodgers and the red number underneath, my heart does like a little flip, a little flutter, a little hesitation or whatever. The most beautiful uniform that in Major League history, in my opinion, and it just does something to me. I'm going to tell you, Fred, and if Fred is still with us, I hope he is, and Ronnie, when the Dodgers play on the road and they wear the gray uniforms that say Los Angeles on the front, I turn the channel. I switch the channel. I can only watch them if it says Dodgers. Because 50% of the time or 60% of the time they'll wear the one that says Dodgers. But the other times they'll wear the ones that say Los Angeles. I can't watch it. It does nothing for me. Isn't that weird? That's the truth. That's the truth. The only time I kept the game on that they had Los Angeles jerseys on was in last year's World Series one game. But I turn it off after it bothers me so much. I've been to Dodger Stadium. I've been to Los Angeles. I've been there. I mean, I own an LA cap. It just bothers me. I don't know why. It just does. I can't get over it. And when someone says the most home runs ever hit by a Dodger, and someone says the hell was his name, Mike Marshall or Steve Garvey or something like that, I go, whoa, hold it, time out. That's the most home runs by a Los Angeles Dodger. That's not the most home runs by a Dodger. The most home runs by a Dodger, Edwin Donald Snyder. Okay?
That's right.
Get your story straight. Don't start the records from 1958 on, because that really is a fly in the ointment for me. Anyway, let's get back to our guest.
Hey, one quick question. Hey, Fred, are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of the LA Dodgers, what the hell's going on there?
Well,
what the hell's going on there?
We talked about this last since July 31 and before that. The administration wanted to save bucks and minor league players, so they really didn't help the bullpen. And then Jansen, of course, had the heart thing come back.
Heart issue, yeah.
And they may sneak into the playoffs. Who knows? But they're not going to go very far without a closer who can actually close, and without a guy who can get to the eighth inning. And with Dave Roberts, who's pulling them after six, you got to have somebody who can get you through the seventh, eighth, and ninth. So
he pulled the guy in the fourth today.
That's what I'm saying. So it's like, again, a lot of people say he's not pulling the strings. It's really Friedman and Farid. I don't know who's pulling the strings, but if they don't make the playoffs, or if they get blown out in the first, in the playoff game or in the wild card, if that be the case or whatever, Dave Roberts might go, and because I don't think this administration wants to take the heat. It's sort of like the guy in D.C. I mean, everybody else makes the mistake, and we don't. So
I heard a rumor that Mike
good point, Fred.
Might be the new manager.
What?
Fred Walin, that's a very good point. We don't make the mistake.
We don't make
Roberts made the mistake. So now we bring in Mike Scioscia, and everything will be cool. Have you heard any whispers out there in L.A. about Mike Scioscia coming over?
No, I don't think it's going to be Scioscia. I think he's too old, and also he's not an analytical guy. I mean, he's
not.
He's not use baseball analytics, and these guys live by it. So
and I don't like it.
And this left-right thing. I mean, there are hitters who hit better against right-handed hitters who hit better against right-handed pitchers. But if a season they don't, then the next time Roberts or Friedman make a call, they're going to pinch hit. I mean, there was a game this year where Hernandez hits a home run the time before, and now they switched to a left-handed pitcher, and apparently he's not hitting well against left-hand, and they actually, no, excuse me, it's the other way around. He hits well against left-handers, and he hit a home run the time before, and they pitched Peterson, which is fine, I mean, he got 20-something home runs this year, but I'm saying you don't do that to a player. You don't do it to his ego. This is the major leagues, and also it was like the fifth inning, and this is before September 1.
You're right. You're right.
I agree entirely, and I mentioned earlier that I owed the entire world an apology, and I do, and I will explain. I am so against this analytical age that is going on right now. It's just destroying the game of baseball. And incredibly, I am responsible, literally responsible, for these absolutely asinine statistical analysis going on today, and I will explain. Back in the 1970s, I was the first person to work on statistics, these ridiculously absurd, complex statistics on artificial turf, the effect that artificial turf had on batting average, and I did not intend it for this to become this Bill James insanity. The truth of the matter is, I was just trying to explain why my buddy, my pal Bill Lee's earner average was going up significantly when he was pitching on fields with artificial turf. So I created this entire genre of Bill James nutcases who now have taken over the entire sport and are choking the life out of it. I was at a memorabilia show. My wife's right here. Peg, do you know what year that was? Several years ago, when I'm not sure when it was, but it was during the heyday when Bill James was first becoming huge. And at this memorabilia show, Bill Lee, I had brought in Bill Lee for the promoter of the show to do an appearance. And Bill, who will be fashionably late to his own funeral, walks in. There are already about 75 people waiting to meet him. And the promoter of the show is following him as he walks in, and I could see the steam coming out of the promoter's ears. And Bill spies me sitting at a table, and he points to me and shouts excitedly, "That's Scott Russell! That's Scott Russell! That's Scott Russell!" And Bill James couldn't carry his jock. So at this point, I looked at Bill and I said, "Bill, you've got a whole bunch of people waiting for you. I'll catch up with you later." And I said, incidentally, as far as Bill James carrying my jock, nor would he want to. So, but at any rate, I was literally responsible for this, the insanity that you see today. Bob Gibson, can you imagine telling Bob Gibson that you go 6 innings and give up 3 runs, that it's a quality start?
Or one spot.
Yeah, he'd pinch your neck off. I mean, it's ridiculous. We used to look forward to these great pitching duels between guys like Marichal and Koufax and Drysdale and Spahn and these great pitchers. And now they're coming out to get these guys after 5 or 6 innings.
It's so nuts.
Yeah, and pitch counts. People are literally... Pitchers they have been bred. They have been inbred to incur these injuries because of the fact that starting today, no, there's got to be a pitch count. You can't throw that much. You can't. In the Little League, they're starting it. It's absurd. Some of these pitchers who pitched like 15, 20 years
now.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
These pitchers would pitch like 150, 140 to 160 pitches. Spahn, Gibson, they think nothing of it. And
That's
the
right.
games would go into extra innings. And by the way, they wouldn't have 4 days rest. They'd have 3 days rest and go out there again and do it.
That's right.
I mean, it's absurd.
And they never had arm trouble.
Nope, never had arm trouble. My friend Bill Lee is still pitching. Now, let's see, I'm 73, Bill is 71, God bless him. He's still throwing. He's still throwing.
I never heard of Tommy John. Nobody did.
No.
It was ridiculous.
Nope. Everyone needed the surgery, required it back then. Now they're giving it to kids when they're like 16 years old,
right,
when they don't even need the surgery because they're figuring that they strengthen the tendons. The entire thing is just absolutely ridiculous. It just is.
Yeah.
And they're ruining the game. They're literally ruining the game.
You know what's really remarkable, and just to prove your point, to add to your point, Julio Urias, of course, the Dodgers babied him beyond belief. And again, if you remember correctly, last May 2017, he hurts his arm. Remember now, they're not letting him go more than 60 innings or 60 pitches or 65 pitches. They babied him beyond belief, and he hurt his arm, and he's been out until now. He pitched for Oklahoma City, and now he's going to be brought up for the Dodgers, I guess, for the last couple of weeks. But the point is, you protect him, you overprotect him, it doesn't matter. Injuries are going to happen, so you may as well let the guy go 110 pitches, give me a break. And certainly with the Dodgers relief corps, and I'll tell you what, Kershaw is not Kershaw from 3 years ago. He doesn't throw as hard. I understand that. I'd still rather have Kershaw go the extra, get to the 7th instead of the 6th, and have one fewer relief pitcher have to, to gamble on that to the LA Dodgers.
Exactly.
And he's, and once in a while he does gamble on Kershaw, but the others he won't, and it's going to cost him. It has cost him. How many games this year? I mean, when they were 10 games under 500, at one point of this season, I would swear to you, I don't know what percentage, but some of those games were lost because they couldn't get to Jansen. And then, of course, Jansen gets the heart again, and it doesn't matter. He's not the same Jansen with the heart. He's not on the pills, which he should be, and I don't care what anybody says. And I don't care. He's got to be thinking in his head, my heart's palpitating here. It's a different world. The Dodgers shouldn't have allowed him back on the team. He ought to have the surgery now. But it's so again, they're going to blame Roberts if they lose, but I think a lot of it is higher than Roberts.
Yeah, I agree with you.
There's no doubt about that.
Crippling they took out after 4 innings today.
Yeah. 3 1/3, they took him out.
Yeah.
They took him out with one out in the 4th inning. I thought when they took Stripling out today, well, maybe there's a method to their madness. They're going to use Stripling down the road in the next 6 or 7 days in relief. But we'll see if that comes to fruition. I don't think it will. Jumping back 3 minutes to comment by Fred on Kershaw should be left in after the 6th inning. A couple of years in a row in the postseason, the St. Louis Cardinals made the Dodgers pay dearly for Kershaw coming out for the 7th inning and turned those series around drastically. The other point I'd like to make is that not all of the SABR and the statistics that we've been castigating on the show tonight are bad. Some of them are quite clever. This is my opinion. Some of them are quite clever. Some of them pay off well. Some of them are good to go for me anyway. And the other thing is when you have a guy like Robin Roberts who can make 36 starts in a season and pitch 6 other games in relief and throw 360 innings and throw 28 complete games, and he lasts for 20 years and he never hurts his arm, you have 5 other guys that you never heard of. Carl Spooner comes to mind that lost their total career because of not being what you guys considered to be babied, and I could not agree with that 100%. And the other thing is that there's money invested in these guys that has never been invested before. Guys like Robin Roberts back in the day made $75,000 or $85,000 a year. Juan Marichal made like $100,000 a year. In today's money, that's like $550,000 a year. Kershaw's making $35 million a year.
Yeah.
There's a difference, gentlemen. There's a huge difference in what teams were investing in their pitchers back in the 40s and 50s and what they're investing today. I just wanted to make that point before we left the air tonight. So
I agree, Peter. I agree with Peter. Yeah, there's got to be a balance between the analytical stuff and overdoing it. I agree. I agree.
Well, I wanted to go on record. I wanted to go on record as saying that before we left the air, because I know that we have many listeners, and many listeners are going to be one way and the other way or whatever. And usually I don't give a rat's ass about that, but I don't want my name, if you want to call it that. It sounds so egotistical. I don't mean it that way. But I didn't want Peter Trunk's name to be in the same bag as totally against SABR statistics, totally against letting pitchers pitch more than 100 pitches, totally against this, totally against that, because I'm not. I have to be honest with you. I'm really not. And I'll even go back further in the show. Bob Dylan might be an asshole, and he probably is. I've never met him. But he's a genius. He hasn't performed up to par in many years, and he's going on his name now to make his money, which he doesn't need, by the way. He plays like 240 nights a year, which he doesn't need. He's got $375 million in the bank. But in his halcyon days, there was no one who could write a song like Bob Dylan. No one.
I agree with you. I followed him, as I said, from as far south as Aberdeen, Maryland, all the way up to Burlington, Vermont. And I loved his music, and I still love his music. But he just became a grumpy old man. Just very briefly, I should tell you this, too. And I think that, again, my friend Bill Lee would make a great guest. But speaking of the Los Angeles Dodgers, when Bill was pitching for the University of Southern California, a lot of people perhaps do not realize this, but his teammates were Tom Seaver, Brent Strum, Ray Lamb, Tom House, and Jim Barr. 6 major league pitchers on one collegiate pitching staff under Rod Dedeaux. One evening at the Hollywood Bowl, and you can ask Bill about this. One evening at the Hollywood Bowl, while Bill was a senior in college, he saw Al Campanis sitting pretty close to where he was, and he walked over and he said, "Mr. Campanis, hi, I'm Bill Lee. I pitch for Southern Cal." "Oh, I'm familiar with you," Al Campanis says. And Bill asked him, "Sir, what are my chances of becoming and being signed by the Los Angeles Dodgers?" Al Campanis looked at young Bill Lee, a college senior, and said, "Well, you don't have Koufax's poise. You don't have Koufax's command. You don't have Koufax's curveball. You don't have Koufax's arm speed." Bill got up and said, "And I'm not Jewish either," and walked away. Can you imagine drawing an analogy between Sandy Koufax and some kid that just wants to know if he can make the ball club?
Right.
Unbelievable.
Well, we're all old enough to know that there are times and there are places and there are things that happen to people that we admire, and sometimes they're not the greatest thing. I'm sure that Pete Hamill has had his moments of, what the fuck did he just do or say? We're all human. We're all made out of flesh and blood. Nobody's made out of iron and steel. I don't want to quote the Ray Davies of the Kinks, but it's true. We're all made of flesh and blood, and there are times when we soar like eagles, and there are times when, not so much. And that was probably one of the times for Al, and we all know the other time. With that, I'm going to have to call a close to the show. I want to thank Fred Walin and Ron Rabinovitz, my partners in this endeavor. And a special thanks to our friend and guest, Scott Russell. And I want to extend on the air, and I'll do this off the air too, I want to extend to Scott an open invitation to come back on the show and discuss SABRmetrics, Bill Lee, Prophet's End, Joey Giardello, anything that you want to talk about. Brooklyn Dodgers, the Polo Grounds, where you went to see them play, and any and all things that you're interested in will interest us and our audience. And I thank you for appearing on the show tonight. And I want to say to all of you three gentlemen, thank you very much, and have a great evening. Good night.
Thank you so much, and it would be my honor to return.
Thank you. Take care, Scott. Bye-bye.
Take care. And I think we're off. What I'm going to do, I think they're all gone.
This has been a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.